Showtime, and we're live. Welcome everyone to another episode of LunarCrush Live. I am flying solo today. It's episode 116. I'm joined by Halsey Minor here in a second, CEO and founder of Vivid Labs. Excited to go through his history. Spent a lot of time in tech. Excited to dive into that and also see what they're building over there at Vivid Labs. Sounds like they're working on an NFT publishing platform. A lot of different pieces to that we're going to go through. As always, our disclaimer, we do not take payment for our live stream. We bring on exciting people, fun people that have dedicated their careers and lives to this space and the cryptocurrency, Web3, NFT industry, whatever we're calling it nowadays. Next week on our live stream, we've got Vayner3, a Web3 consultancy coming on. It'll be super fun to go through that. So please stay tuned for that. And we're going to get into it. So let's hit this intro and let's have some fun. Halsey, welcome to the show.
I like your intro video.
Got a little smile out of you there.
Very Web3 of you.
Appreciate that. So we always like to start every show. Where are you in the world and what's it like there today?
I'm in Los Angeles and it's been between 85 and 89 every day.
A little balmy there. I'm just south of you in Orange County.
Oh, yeah. Okay. So, wintertime 77 degrees, summertime 87, wintertime 77, summertime 87, sort of paradise if you don't have to drive.
Do you surf?
Not well. Good idea.
Yeah, today's one of those days. It's just so beautiful here. I always tell people coming to Southern California, even though they want to come visit in the winter, it's all about coming in the summer.
Yeah. Well, I have to say, honestly, it's 65 in the winter, so not so bad.
Love it. So I did a little research. You've got you've had quite the epic ride in tech over the years. I'd love to hear your story and your background, and what your career has kind of looked like over the years.
Okay, so it's 8 years. I'll try to kind of speed through. So I started CNET Networks in 1993. At the time, there was no way of publishing content on the internet other than by hand, hand coding. So I created a web publishing platform, which I spun out. They became an $11 billion company and the fastest growing software company to $500 million ever. And in 1998, CNET was put in the NASDAQ 100. It was the fastest company ever to make the NASDAQ 100. It took 5 years from start. During that period, only Yahoo and CNET made the NASDAQ 100 during the 90s. And on January 2000, February 2000, when I left, unlike most internet companies, we had earned $1.5 billion. A big chunk of that came from spinning out Vignette, which we kept 35% of. And I left because Salesforce went live on January of 2000. I was a co-founder and the second largest shareholder of Salesforce for the first 6 years. When I stepped down from CNET, I spent 4.5 years building Salesforce.
Wow.
I rang the bell on the New York Stock Exchange with Mark Benioff, and I went off the board. And at that time, I started Minor Ventures, which is where I started cloud-based companies myself. So if anybody's familiar with Google Voice, I started that as part of Minor Ventures in my office. About 5% of global DNS runs through OpenDNS, which we started and Cisco bought for $640 million. When crypto came around in 2012, I was very interested. 2013, I started a company now called Uphold, which is certainly not the size of Coinbase, but I think it's something on the order of 5 million. It's a multi-billion-dollar company that obviously kind of competes in the web wallet.
Native to Brave as well, right? That's like one of their first.
Yeah. I mean, a lot of people know them through Brave. Yeah. A lot of people I don't even talk about it, but I actually started a search engine in 1998, which was bought by NBC and named NBCI. So the total, I've now created 6 companies worth more than $2 billion, and the total is about 285 billion. And the number of people who visit websites of companies that I've started is about 320 million a month now. And Vivid Labs originally started as a platform for using unused hardware on the internet for doing video processing, and as a competitive to Amazon and other centralized providers. For a variety of reasons, that was a very, very, very difficult thing to do. One of the experiences at Salesforce was the first 2 or 3 years. Companies, as you can imagine, were not willing to put their customer data in a website, and they didn't trust the company. They didn't trust the security. And most importantly, it was outsourcing, because typically companies would spend $60 million for CRM software, and Salesforce was $60 per person per month. And you could get up, instead of 2 years, you could get up in 2 months, or maybe sometimes even 2 weeks. So that was a real battle. And what I noticed when we built out all this wonderful infrastructure was, all the big media companies said, where's my video being processed? And we're like, well, we don't know. It's all around the world, servers. And they're like, well, if the movie gets out, or the scenes before the movie get out, before the movie gets out, you realize you've completely destroyed our business. And it was deja vu all over again. And I didn't want to spend another 3 years trying to convince people that using unused data capacity in data centers, which is about 30% of all computers today, is the equal of using Amazon.
Right.
And so we started looking at NFTs, and we came at NFTs from a completely different perspective. And it was a bit of an evolving, concept. But first, we recognized that we could do things like 2-hour movies as NFTs because of all of our infrastructure. And then, as we started really deeply thinking about what an NFT could be, we realized that we could fundamentally transform the idea of NFTs. And I'm going to talk about August 17th in a moment, because it's going to be a very big day. But what we realized was NFTs don't have to be a single JPEG. They can be any number of files up to 32 gigabytes. We support 200 different kinds of files. So we support all audio and video formats. We support PDFs, Excel, Word. We support AR. We support really 3D objects. We support. So what this means is you can create an NFT that has a basket of content. It's not just a single object. And your imagination can run wild in terms of what kind of content you want to put in. And sort of the coup de grace, the ultimate, I think, realization that we've made that's I think going to prove to be utterly transformative to the industry is we realized that NFTs should be updatable. And that means that when I buy an NFT, the creator should still be able to send me content over time, and that there should be the ability by sending content to sort of maintain a community with your buyers, and to continue to provide additional value. And of course, it opens up entirely new use cases. The reason I brought up August 18th is because I think it's going to be probably one of the most important days in the history of the NFT market to date, because that's when we'll place our first multi-asset NFT on OpenSea, without OpenSea doing any engineering at all. So you'll be able to go to OpenSea and you'll be able to have access to the full NFT, to have audio and video and all kinds of PDF files and all kinds of stuff that we've created. And then we're going to update it on the marketplace. So every 3 or 4 days, we'll put another asset that'll show up on the marketplace. Please don't buy it because we're putting it there. We're putting it there so that people can experience it. I don't know what price we're going to put on it, but one that deeply discourages people from buying it.
I'd be careful. You never know. You never know with this space what the community can do. You let the internet run with it, and it's a whole new game.
But what's extraordinary is we have a platform. We have Pro, we have Shopify, and on the 18th, it'll be the launch of our app on iOS and Android that actually allowed that NFT to be created. So I can just take my phone, I can do a video, audio, pull it all out of, or my iPad, I can put all that content in. I click mint, I send it to MetaMask, and I connect with OpenSea, and then I can now sell my my NFT on OpenSea. So what will show up on OpenSea, it will be the graphic picture of the, like all single JPEG, GIF, whatever it is that's there. It'll say on the top of it, it'll say Vivid Advanced NFT, and you'll be able to click, and then you'll be able to go through our player that'll give you access to all the additional media, as well as the media that gets updated, or you can click and experience that on your phone. So the whole idea, when I first started approaching this, obviously it was very exciting to see communities evolving around NFT projects. The one thing I've done in my life reasonably well was CNET was a $500 million a year content company. That's back in 2000. And we also produced 5 TV shows, 4 on USA, 1 on Sci-Fi, 1 CNBC, and Ryan Seacrest's first 2 shows were actually, he hosted 2 of our shows. So I've done content, and the fear that I had about the NFT equation was that the amount of content that's being sold is not sufficient in the long term to maintain the kind of value that people expect. There's an equation in content. Some content is just worth more than others. And so if I can send you an album with 11 songs that has cover art, that has videos of people in the studio rehearsing the song, if it can have videos of people, of artists writing the songs, if I can put all of that together into a package, and then I can update it with tour schedules, etc. That content has value. It has significant value. And so we've been working incredibly hard over the last 2 years to make this work. And so just in conclusion, our pro version allows companies to create their own white label marketplaces, which has all of our content features, which will then give them, their buyers, the ability to take that content to secondary markets, which is now possible. We've shoehorned all that functionality into Shopify. Shopify's in beta, but it won't be long before they come out of beta and people can just choose us as an app and they can use all of our features. And then, of course, on the 17th is the launch of the app. We've spent a year building, first for iOS, then for Android. So in summation, our goal has been to create media infrastructure that can deliver really high value content. So we can do 2-hour streaming movies, for instance, and as long as it's under 32 gigabytes, you can put as much content as you want into the individual NFT. So August 18th, 17th, we should be on OpenSea, and the app should be available for downloading.
Well, thank you for that summary. A lot to unpack there. I want to start with, you identified the problem that I think a lot of people in this space have been trying, or you're solving what a lot of people are talking about solving, which is basically cloud, for decentralized ledger technologies, right? Like it's the missing piece there of delivery and storage that we just don't have. And so you started to kind of solve that problem, and then said, hey, I'm not sure I want to go down the path again of saying, hey, I'm going to kind of be this infrastructure layer of having computer storage for everyone across all the different apps. But you said, hey, I found a really epic application for that, which is, taking something that is, in the name non-fungible, but that doesn't necessarily mean that it can't be updated or can't be, there can't be an iteration on that, right? The non-fungible piece is the ownership piece.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, we, because of what we do, what we can do, we have, really kind of interesting customers. Like, for instance, we have a law firm that wants to use us to take last will and testaments and put them on the blockchain, but they want to also have a video from the person whose will it is, explaining all of the decisions that they've made and why, because those never show up in the legal document. And so you get these absolutely brutal fights, particularly when there's a lot of value in jeopardy. You have these, decade-long fights over what was really the intention of the person who signed the will. They'll question whether the person was of sound mind and body. They'll question whether they were outside in the rain when they were being forced to. They'll question whether the signature is actually real. Is that the one that was signed? And there, all of these opportunities to provide in addition to that, they can also do things like leave messages for loved ones, and so it's a really it's a really interesting use case. But like you said, if I want to update my will, I just update it on the blockchain, and that becomes the new will, because we know the order in which these things were put in place. So I believe that we're on the cusp of a major expansion in the utility of NFTs, not just what we're doing. I think there are a lot of other companies doing very interesting things as well. And we got this, this is not atypical. We had this burst of activity and this burst of money and this burst of excitement, which quite frankly was kind of like the early days of the internet, only condensed down to about a year and a half. And then it kind of like calms down, and then it starts building back up again with really solid and important use cases. And that's kind of where I think we are now.
So that was one of my questions. So you do hear a lot of people say, Web3 is where the internet was in 96 or 98 or whatever year they pick. But, do you buy that analogy of, this is like internet, like kind of going through that, seeing that life cycle, seeing that kind of boom bust kind of cycle and going through it? I mean, is it as monumental as that?
Well, it's hard to know, because we know, like when I started in 93, actually launched CNET on 95, April of 95 on the internet, along with our TV programming. I had no idea how big the internet was going to be. I did it because it was something I was passionate about. I was on the internet in 1989, actually, on the well, on a text-based virtual world called Lambda Move from Park. And I was always a voracious reader of technology magazines. And so sort of my, perfect job was to turn a website into, to take on the magazines and use the web as a better way of delivering information. But, I had no clue how big. I thought the internet was going to be big, but I mean, the internet's big. I mean, it's
paradigm shift.
Bigger than anyone could ever have imagined. And so all of us, Jerry Yang at Yahoo, we just started categorizing websites on a server at Stanford, and he was just screwing around, and so none of us knew really how big it was. Now I've got companies, Salesforce, CNET, that are 20, 25 years old. So you've seen, the maturation of those companies, how big they can get, how many different things they can do. I think we're just right now in a very early stage of Web3. I think, we're going to need 10 years to look back on it and say, is that really as fundamental as the invention of the internet itself? I certainly know there are, certainly a lot of, there's a lot of possibility in Web3, but sort of measuring it against the birth of, maybe one of the most important technologies outside of fire is probably going to take a little time for us to learn and be able to kind of look back and see.
Yeah, that was that's a good way to phrase it. Is Web3 as monumental as fire and the internet? Because I would put those two potentially together in that category. And it does feel like, it feels like something different. It's more global. It's faster. It's like when I think
much faster.
I think about companies, there's all these and you've done, sounds like you've done a lot of venture too. And when things were kind of hot, people were like, I don't understand these valuations. I don't understand any of this. And part of the reasoning, I feel, is because, if you're an Uber, and you've got this, if the equation is what's the total addressable market times whatever the team times whatever you've got, if the Uber's got a 7x7 area and they're like, well, we're going to go to Austin next, or we're going to go to New York, and we're trying to figure that addressable market out, that's a whole different thing than, hey, I can launch something and instantly have access to the entire planet, or anyone connected to the internet, I guess. And so it's there's such a more rapid pace there for founders and for people starting.
I grew at the pace when CNET launched. There were about 350,000 people on the internet. I grew at the speed of the internet.
Yeah.
Now CNET was in a very rare, so we were, content companies don't generate $500 million a year, even today. I mean, there's very few websites out there that are content that are doing $500 million in revenue. But what was, we were, the search engines were, Google and Yahoo, they were all the largest companies in terms of revenue, back then. But the reason that we were so large and so successful was because everybody getting on the internet needed a computer and they needed software. And so there was a one-to-one correlation between people on the internet and people using and buying computers. And so we were sort of made ourselves an indispensable utility for figuring out what kind of web browser you wanted, or, and it was a very dynamic time, a lot of products coming out, a lot of software coming out, a lot of innovation happening. And so we profited, off of that by, I think if you took the next 10 computer websites and you added them up, they didn't equal the traffic. I mean, our traffic was typically around equal to Salesforce. I mean, Amazon or eBay around that time. I think when I left, we were the 13th largest website in the world. But I mean, that was in 2000. That wasn't a big number. And so, you can in a week kind of gain more people now than, I got in, a year and a half or 2 years, just because of the scale of the internet now and how international it is. It was very much an American phenomenon.
Yeah.
And then now that's just really not the case. Not that America doesn't have some of the biggest companies still, but there's a lot of great international companies as well. Obviously, China has its own thing.
What was it like scaling that for those users at that time with the infrastructure that was available to you guys?
Well, so, I mean, the interesting thing was there was no database. There was no web publishing system that used a database. I mean, you have to think about how raw this was. I mean, there was HTML 1.0. And all of our content, if you go back to the Wayback Machine and you go back to 95, whatever, and you look, you'll see all of our content was center aligned. Yeah. There was no tables or any of this stuff, and little teeny graphics and I mean, it was really, a lot of the magazines and the newspapers, they weren't afraid because they looked at our little graphics and they're like, okay, yeah, well, whatever. Who's really going to want to be interested in that. It was a very difficult time. So anyway, so I had to build my own software to do web publishing because I wasn't going to hire 1,000 people to do hand HTML, which is what everyone was doing. And there really weren't any engineers who had experience on the internet outside of universities and the military and Bell Labs and Belcore. And so I ended up, even though I was in San Francisco, I hired all of my engineers in Watchung, New Jersey, because they all came out of Bell Labs and Belcore, who were experiencing problems at that time. And so, my first 50 engineers were easily the equivalent of Google's first 50 engineers, all PhDs, all out of Carnegie Mellon and MIT, et cetera. And so we, I had a guy who had run a document management system for Belcore, and Belcore, for people who don't remember way back then, you had long distance companies like AT&T, and then you had local companies who, local telephone companies, and they were separated. And there were, I think, 6 of them. And Belcore was for those phone companies, and Bell Labs for AT&T. We all know Bell Labs is they invented Transistor and Fire and the Wheel, and, all this stuff. So I hired the head of multimedia out of Bell Labs, and so one of the guys I hired out of Bellcore had created a document management system for PXs that run in these big sophisticated PBXs that run in local phone in your local phone company. And so we got him and a team to build the first web publishing system. And then I didn't want to be competing in web publishing and in the publishing business, so I spun it out. We kept 35% of the company. 18 months later, I sold half to Goldman Sachs for $10 million and thought it was a genius. And then in another 2 years, the other half was worth $1.3 billion. But the hard part was, we were an Nasdaq 100 company. We were profitable. Very few companies were. Most companies were wildly unprofitable. And it was very hard to run a real business where, there was like so much, the whole world ran on FOMO. And, Yahoo, and it was huge at the time, and CNET, we had the same problem. We lost 25% of our employees every year because there were so many startups. They would come to us and they would take our employees. And the rule of thumb is that a company can't function if it loses more than 15% of its employees each year. So, running a company that's trying to grow its revenue, trying to grow its profit, it's trying to, and anyway, after 7.5 years and a month after the launch of Salesforce, we were a Nasdaq 100 company, which I never dreamed would ever happen. We grew 130% year over year. We were highly profitable. And I sort of achieved kind of everything that, I ever imagined I could achieve in my lifetime. And that's when I stepped down and started working with the first CEO, John Dillon, the first CEO of Salesforce. And then 2.5 years later, Mark Benioff, when he became CEO, and spent 4.5 years doing that before going back into the business of, starting companies.
What was like payment rails like happening back then? So for like publishing, I'm imagining like it was a little bit after that, with everything in the world that were there. Do you think that was part of the reason that in that late 90s moment where it was like you couldn't monetize at point and click, where like 5-8 years later it was totally ubiquitous?
Well, no. Okay. Well, there were a couple things going on. First of all of us were in a race to give away content. Is creating 3
actually, I lost you real quick right there. You said we were all in a race to give away content, and I really
we were basically in a race to give away content, right? All of our content was free. Yahoo, everything was free. Weather was free. Stock quotes were free. We were all in a race to devalue content in a way. And there was one particular writer for the New York Times who just could not help himself but write about how risky it was to use your credit card over the internet. He's just pissed me off no end because he was just making people afraid of something that they shouldn't have been afraid of. And putting their credit card in and buying stuff, in part because they had a great experience. But it was, everybody expected everything for free, so nobody wanted to pay for any content, and none of us, it didn't dawn on any of us to even try to charge for it. So we all had advertising driven models, and now the world is like kind of inverted, where People are buying streaming services. They're buying NFTs. They're buying, all kinds of content today. Nobody would ever have done that in the 90s. I mean, the idea of paying for content was just like, no way am I ever going to, pay. I'm not going to pay for anything. Everything's got to be free.
I kind of assimilate that a little bit to right now with, the fear of understanding, wallet addresses and, people like in this space, everyone used to send test deposits all the time still. Right.
Yes.
And that's gone away, but it's like, there's probably still people that do that. It's like, well, if you copied and pasted the address and you put it in there, if it doesn't get there, it means that there's a much bigger problem going on. Right. It means that Bitcoin
right.
for the first time ever. And so a question about content and delivery and with Netflix, right? Like Netflix just hit their they did this, and now it's like subscriptions for the first time ever have flattened, right? And they've got this, I guess you could say, they talked about the password sharing problem a little bit. And I don't know how much leakage is actually there in their model, but doesn't that seem like a perfect application for a little bit of what you guys are building, where you could have this kind of login and you have the track record of that login, and then you could update or change, or if there's new content that needs to be added, you can kind of update that, but you do have the uniqueness of like one person, one address.
Well, I mean, Netflix is interesting. We just did an NFT drop for a show on Netflix.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the Web3 model, and I'm really on the fence about this, because there's a lot of value in distribution, right? There's a lot of value in me going to Netflix and Netflix showing me shows that I might be interested in, and having good algorithms to do that. But somebody could very easily go around Netflix and put a 2-hour movie inside of an NFT that we have with the making of, et cetera. And in a kind of Web3 way, go direct to consumer. I mean, a lot of people are talking about that, and we're talking to people about that who kind of have that vision. The hard part really is just distribution. When these big streaming services, they have so many eyeballs that they have the ability to to generate a lot of viewership.
The reason they let it run as long as they did, obviously it's more of a benefit to let people share and have that content be out there, and then potentially try and convert at some point. It seems like now is the time that maybe this is probably the same conversation they're having, 10 times a day over there of like, what do we do now?
Yeah. Well, they are the most interesting company, one of the most interesting companies, in the history of the internet, because nobody has counted them dead more times than any other company. And I have to admit, when they went from mailing CDs of movies to your house, and then you sent them back, and that was their model, to streaming content on the internet in something like 2000, I thought they were mad. I mean, it's like the internet doesn't support streaming, movies. Nobody's ever going to do that.
Yeah. Kind of like no one's ever going to sleep on the couch in your house, like Airbnb. That's like a farce. It's
exactly, exactly. So I, nobody has figured out how to survive and thrive more than Netflix has over the intervening, 25 years. So they're one of those companies that, I certainly would never count out in terms of finding a new way of growing their business.
So TBD. So I want to ask you, so how did you say it was 32 gigabytes?
Yeah.
So how did you get 32 gigabytes onto the blockchain for each NFT?
Well, we do two things. We store on Filecoin, and we have to do a lot of gymnastics to get the content on Filecoin, and it doesn't really support the speed or performance that would be necessary for you to click on a movie and watch it.
Right.
So we do centralized storage for caching and performance. So you've got centralized storage, so that when you click the movie, it comes up, it streams fast, the experience is good. But we use IPFS and Filecoin for longer term store for forever storage, whatever
Right.
that ends up meaning. So we use both. If you get files that are reasonably large, IPFS is just it's not a solution that that works. If you have small files, it works fine. But if you have really large files, it becomes a problem. Large files are a problem anyway. Like we have to figure out what happens when you turn off your phone, when you're in the middle of uploading 32 gigabytes. I mean, it's a hard problem for everybody. It's just that Google and Apple and others have been thinking about these problems for decades. Actually, right now, the last couple of things that we're working on for launching the app are actually those. You close down the app, you open it back up. Do you really want to start a 1 gigabyte file over? The 32 gigabyte limit is the limit that's actually been put in place by Filecoin for each of our NFTs. They've been a very good partner of ours. We've worked very, very closely with them, and we think they're definitely the best solution for really the long-term storage of content. Play a very vital role, and I think in the NFT space, and ultimately in ensuring the longevity of content.
So is the innovation then there? Because you're saying there is still a little cloud that needs to kind of, like you said, you're doing a little gymnastics to kind of get there. Is the innovation around quickly identifying where the files are that are attached to that specific NFT and being able to serve that in a fast way, so that as a user, it's like, right now, if I'm on Instagram or Twitter, I'm just swiping through, right? And it's like, you're not going to wait for a blockchain transaction, to clear and go for the next file. It's like,
we have a proof of stake network, so it's instantaneous. We have miners. We have miners who do video processing for us. We have miners who do transactions whenever we write to the blockchain. And a lot of our NFTs will have, you'll write to the blockchain 10 times, because you add something, you add something, you add something, you add something. But we're a proof of stake network, so we're highly performant, and significant processing throughput that we really developed back in the days when we were trying to serve, figure out how do we serve 4K television out of a off of a group of distributed servers around the world.
And so how does the token power that economy that you guys have built with the staking and then on the platform? Like, how's that looking right now?
Yeah, so the token is used as gas, and for the platform, we're in the process of sort of figuring out exactly what that is. That'll be a fixed amount, sort of a floating amount, and then when we launch the app, it'll actually be free. We'll put a cap on the amount of data that you can do, just because we want creators to come in. We want to incentivize creators to come in and start creating, and we want to see what they do before we sort of figure out what's the best way to kind of monetize the ability to create. So we've got all these new tools that have been in the hands of creators they've never had before. We have no ability to really understand the kinds of things that people are going to create. So we'll make it easy. We'll go back to the 1990s model and make it free for people. And
start
then
it over again, but to a global audience and a much higher velocity. And so you guys are going to cover the gas. So what's the consensus for the token then? Is it like, are you going to be also like EVM compatible or?
Yeah.
Okay.
We're EVM compatible. Yeah.
Great. And so I'm a creator. I want to come in. You guys are going to cover my VID token gas for a little bit. I now have access to 32 gigabytes of storage to create an advanced non-fungible token.
Yeah.
What are some of the
And you have access to Polygon, which is the first.
Gotcha.
Which is Polygon, and then we've done a lot of testing around OpenSea, but we're on Polygon, so any Polygon marketplace could take advantage of the fact that we're now creating these advanced NFTs.
And so are you going to have the VID token, which is going to be a token on top of Polygon? And then are you utilizing a standalone blockchain via like a Supernets?
It ends up using both of our blockchains.
Okay.
The first thing you do is you write to our blockchain. And then the second thing that we do is that we then remint on Polygon, but for certain reasons like performance and other things for media, our blockchain still plays a critical role. So the VID token is continuously sort of used, and we want to be kind of like a layer 0 company where you could take it from Polygon, you could bring it back on us, you can send it out over Solana, etc. Ultimately, I mean, right now we've built a lot, so we just need to figure out right now how all the things that we've built are going to get used.
It takes I feel like it takes a specific type of entrepreneur to really succeed in this space, because if you think about all of the problems that you had to solve with something like a CNET, right? And then you're on a new technology. Back then with Web3, it's not only do you have to build your audience, build an epic product that people want to use, you kind of have to work it in, with some of the other boundaries that are there, like we're talking about storage and delivery, and then also launching kind of a new token economy, which is an entirely new kind of like business model to get access to those things. And now we're talking to the next iteration of that, which is you're going through what a lot of other projects are also going through right now of like, hey, is it going to be layer 2 and is it going to roll up? Are we going to horizontally scale, which that's what it's kind of looking like the next 18 to 24 months is going to look like, is all of these freestanding standalone blockchains for like application specific, super, like a lot faster, you're your own gas. And then whether it's a layer 0 back across, seems to be making the most sense, because the bridges, like as we've seen, very, very difficult, but it's a whole new set of tools that are now going to be available to this next generation, where I think before it was like setting up servers at the office or your house to run something, and then you had cloud. And then for blockchain, it's kind of the similar thing where it's like, oh, now I just have to like point and click over here and I'm standing by myself and I have this transaction speed.
Yeah, I mean, for the first 3.5 years at CNET, we had our own data center, because data centers didn't really exist. You could correlate when CNET went down with the temperature in San Francisco. It was the perfect correlation, because our servers were in rooms that weren't air conditioned; they just had fans. And so we had some days where it hit 90 degrees and we'd have to shut down our servers because they were too hot. It was a perfect correlation. Like if you wanted to know why CNET went down that day, really all you had to do is go look at the weather report in San Francisco. You could figure
there's some quant somewhere that traded off of something like that at some point.
Yeah, I'm not sure if people figured it out, but that's what was going on.
So what excites you the most right now? We're coming out, depending on who you are, we could say maybe we bottom, in some of the markets right now. And like as entrepreneurs, you're always kind of looking at that as like we're all sitting here watching it, and all the friends and everyone are going to start texting us here once everything moves up another 50%. But like, where do you see the next 12 to 18 months going in this space? And what are you most excited about for the industry as a whole?
Look, I think it all comes down to innovation. Innovation has value. As long as you continue to innovate, you continue to create value. And there's a perfect correlation between the value of companies and the level of innovation that they're able to sort of bring. So, whether crypto's up, crypto's down, whatever it is, as long as the innovation continues, and what I mean about that is, I mean practical, useful innovation. There's a lot of innovation that's not useful. It's kind of trying to decide how many angels can dance on the head of a pin, kind of stuff.
Yeah.
But in terms of really kind of customer focused innovation, so long as that's what you're doing, then I think we'll come out of this, stronger.
And then we got a couple minutes here. Just last question for you, and I appreciate you being on here. This has been super fun. It sounds like you've started a lot of things. You've kind of started the venture studio, where that was kind of like you guys, entrepreneur in residence, your own kind of entrepreneur in residence, where you're spinning up your own stuff. What do you think it takes? It seems like you love that first kind of start something from scratch, take it to a certain spot, and then it's like maybe there's bureaucracy that comes in that you're like, I don't know, or like there's all these things. Like what does it take to be an entrepreneur from idea, paper napkin, to like product market fit, traction, a little bit there? Like what are some of those boundaries that you have to really push through and know that, hey, this is something that I should continue with, or man, I got to scratch this one and go to the next thing?
Yahoo and CNET were the two companies in the NASDAQ 100. Yahoo had somebody else who was running the company, who, other than the person who started it, Jerry Yang didn't run it. I was one of the few. I've been one of the few people who's taken it from zero to being in the NASDAQ 100. It requires, at a certain point, a very different set of tasks. And what happened was in 1997, I missed my numbers on Wall Street. My stock got crushed. And so I called in a professional CEO coach. And, we started talking, and, I remember the one point, because he watched me and what I was doing. And I remember the one point that was kind of most sort of on point was I was having a marketing meeting, and I wanted my head of marketing to be able to come up with all the right answers. And he goes back to my office, and he goes, that's not her job. Her job is to get the right answers out of her group. Like, you're still focused on the individual being able to solve the problem. And so I turned around and I hired Robin Wolander, started Parenting Magazine, and she was running the Sunset Publishing division of Time Warner. And I hired the head of the business, the publisher of Newsweek, which was a big magazine back then. And we went from missing our numbers to being a NASDAQ 100 company in late 1998. And so you realize you've got to flip your skills, and you got to flip your interest. And quite frankly, the reason that I actually left, and the two reasons I left, one was the launch of Salesforce. But the other reason I left is I showed up in my office, and everything on my calendar were things that I hadn't booked. So my calendar was totally booked by the company. I had no free will to decide what I was going to do with my days. And when I realized that, I realized, I've been spending 7.5 years, running on the track machine of the internet bubble, trying to keep everything from falling apart, and had managed to to build something that was important and now obviously long lived, and just decided that that really wasn't for me anymore. That's not what I want to do. But there is a moment that every entrepreneur has to realize, where the skills that got them to wherever they are not the skills that are going to get them to build a company that's still around 20 years later and earning significant amounts of money. That's that. Just maybe some people can realize that on their own. For me, I needed somebody to come in and teach me.
And so it sounds like you go from hiring doers to hiring leaders.
You hire doers to hiring managers. Yeah, that's exactly right.
And so after those 7 years, how did you realize, like, it was just the stock price that happened and you were like, I just need to talk to an executive coach? Or did someone say, like, I got someone that maybe you should talk to. I've been kind of watching the way you've been managing over the last 7 years. I think this is a good person. Like, did you shop around for that person? Did you interview for that person? Like, what were some of the...
No, I went to the HR.
Okay.
And I missed I missed my numbers, and things kind of felt out of control. Honestly, when a company's running really well, the CEO doesn't do anything. The other thing is, I was also getting bored because all the things I was doing were talking to employees and hearing about lawsuits and meeting with investors and it was all that kind of stuff. But no, I mean, when companies aren't well run, people get into fights and arguments, and you don't have it's not an enjoyable place to work. And so if it's properly managed, people can be their best selves. They can achieve. They can be rewarded for achieving. There's a active process in place to find out who's performing and who's underperforming and make sure those are performing move up. There's just a lot of things that have to happen for it to have a happy company. And those are not the things that get you your first 150 employees, up and running. So, maybe some people, are more clever than I, and they can kind of figure the stuff out on their own. For me, I just kind of had to have this sensation that I was not like, it was not working like it was before. And I needed, and I was willing to get help. And, I'm generally not a big fan of consultants, but the person that came in and helped me, really kind of transformed, the way I ran the company, and is, I guess part responsible for, me being able to say I, started an NASDAQ 100 company, because I certainly wouldn't have been able to do that without him.
It's amazing that, you get there as a CEO, or if you're president or whatever your title is, you're trying to be there for everyone, and you're the support system, and, your job ends up being, is the company financed? Are people happy? It's like, it starts to kind of, like you said, it gets to that point. And if you've hired all these great people and they're operating, at some point you're just like, hey, like guardrails a little bit there, just keep things moving. But it seems like it's like companies, like, what do you think it is about certain companies that just continue to innovate? And like, is it the kind of Jack Welch, like, hey, we're going to just always fire the bottom 5%, and after 20 years we have 100% better workforce? Is it like, you also see a lot of times when the founder leaves, the vision leaves, and there's different types of companies that can kind of push through that. So is there,
Yeah, I mean, the good news is all of mine are still around. I mean, literally all of them, and bigger than when I left. I'll tell you a Jack Welch story because I actually met with Jack Welch because I started a search engine and it was bought by NBC and became a $4 billion company. And I ran it for a while after it was sold to NBC. I had 2 jobs. And I went and GE owned NBC. So I was called to New York to meet with Jack Welch. And it was very interesting. I said, I think I've got things kind of screwed up because I've got 19 direct reports. He goes, I have 44. and he could have said I have a 3 handicap, which was actually true. and so I was kind of shocked by that. And he called his assistant in, run his big book, big book. And in it were all his data. And there was, there was data from performance. There was company surveys that people filled out. And he kind of went to page like 330. And he goes, look at this page. And so over the last 10 years, it was like, do you believe in senior management? It was like 55%, 60%, 65%, 70%, 75%, 80%, and I think it was like 90%. And he goes, that I look at. And then he flips the page like 478. And he goes, do you believe that senior management understands the internet? And that was at like 32%, 37%, 35%, 47%. And he goes, that's why we're doing this. And he goes, that's how we're running the company. This is, we need to understand the internet. We need to understand how it affects our business. He built a lot of a huge human resource infrastructure inside of the company to help people kind of progress in their careers. But he had 44 direct reports, and I was literally blown away by it.
It's such an amazing, like, qualitative way to steer the business, right? Like, here's something we believe in, and here's where the future is. We've somehow come to that acknowledgement or that agreement, and so do the people that we have start to at least move in the direction to map towards that, right? It's not like, hey, we're going to just like lay off and lose a bunch of IP from those people that have been there for a while. But hey, like, can we either train those people into understanding what's going on, and can they personally pivot? How do we do that? And then how do we bring in new people or acquire into that? But I love that, just that simple mapping of like, are we headed in this direction? Is the company mapping there? And here's how I know that.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's interesting because everybody's data driven now because there's so much data.
Was it a physical book? Like, was it written
in his book?
Yeah, was it like written in there?
Or no, it was one of those typewriter.
Oh, okay, yeah.
I'll tell you a story from Salesforce. We John Dillon, who was the first CEO, was really great. He ran the company for 2.5 years. And he put together, which I'd never really seen in a small company, a 30-page document for every board meeting that had every kind of ratio, employees to advertising, uptime to employees. It had everything in it. As it turned out, we ended up, for several years running the company based on just one number. We hit in 2002, before Mark came back, we had a month where we lost 8.5% of our subscribers. So if you annualize that, that's 100%. Now we grew at 2%, 20%, 50%, 90%. 2 million, 20 million, 50 million, 90 million. So we were growing quickly, but we were bleeding our subscribers. Some of that we couldn't control because they were startup tech companies that were going out of business. But understanding that one ratio really led to a whole bunch of changes in how the company was operated. So we started compensating salespeople for when customers renewed. We started, people would stop using the product because there was a feature that they wanted. It was there, but they didn't know it. So we started doing better education. Companies would have a bad month, so they would shut us off. And we were month to month. So we started giving, we started reducing the price if you bought for 4 months, 6 months, 12 months. And that means if they had a bad month, they didn't quit. And by June of 2004, when we went public, we were down below, we were about 1% turnover each month. I've lost you.
I hit the mute button. So churn was the KPI that you guys started attacking.
Churn was the KPI. Yeah.
And so which is, I've kind of heard this from some people around. It's like, once you find a KPI that's so important to your business that you don't want to tell people about it, right? Then you've identified that. I mean, at that moment, you guys were focused on engagement.
It was everything.
Yeah,
it was everything. I mean, the company was firing on all cylinders, but we had a major hole in our business. We were just, we had companies just dropping through that hole, and you learn things like the thing that we learned is if we want $1 million in revenue, we need a new salesperson, because the average salesperson generates $1 million in revenue. So if you want 100 million in revenue, you need 100 salespeople. If you want, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
Do you think was Salesforce kind of the pioneer around? There used to be these large contracts that just get sold in, software contracts, like the value was determined by how long and how large a contract potentially could be. But it was like you said, it was selling $60 into middle management, or like understanding where the numbers were for procurement, that they can approve something. And like you kind of grew from within the organizations that you were selling to, versus having to go sell to the top. Was that like a decision, like a business model decision that was made?
Well, there? we did grow from within the organization. Once we got in, we started, doing customer service and other kinds of features. But at that time, if you wanted to put a CRM solution in your company, it was probably about $30 million in 2 years. And you needed to hire KPMG or Arthur Andersen, or you need to hire somebody to come in and actually do it. And I was looking at getting CRM software, and I was in the center of the computer industry, so I knew what was really going on, and I knew these big CRM projects were failing everywhere, despite the fact that Siebel at the time, who was the leader, said they had a 94% satisfaction rate. And so, I got a bid for, it's going to take 18 months and $5 million. And I had to get a new database administrator and all this stuff. And Mark came to me because at the time, CNET was in the top 10 in the world in terms of traffic. And like I said, I'd spun out this enterprise software company that was growing, Vignette was growing at an incredible rate. So I knew the enterprise software business, and I knew the web publishing business. And I had a ironclad rule that I never invested in companies, and I never went on other boards, just so that I could focus on CNET. And I broke both of those for Salesforce, because I thought I thought what it represented to the technology industry was important enough that I wanted to be a part of it, and I wanted to watch it. And you know, that's and you know you know, I mean, I found it important enough, even though there were many frustrating things with security people constantly blocking us from being able to sell to a company. You know, that I, you know, ultimately left CNET and spent, you know, 4.5 years, you know, doing a variety of things trying to help the company, including funding.
Well, Halsey, man, I really appreciate you being here and this sharing the stories with us and getting this out to the audience. But thanks so much for being here. Thank you, everyone, for listening. Check them out, vividlabs.com. And you said August 18th is the launch of the apps, right?
17th, 18th.
17th, 18th. All
Yeah.
right. Check it out, vividlabs.com. Halsey, man, we'll chat with you
All
back.
right.
Thank you so much, my man.
Thanks.